Hello, it's me, meteorologist Ian Kowalski. Today's episode of Weather Eye, we are going to be looking at Winter Storm Fern, which has swept across all of the United States, although we've kind of missed out for the most part here on the western slope of Colorado. We saw a little bit of snowfall over the previous weekend, but for the most part, it is going to be a pretty calm couple of days here, but that's not at all what we saw over towards the east, down south, all the way up to the Midwest into the East Coast. Winter storm swept across the nation. So we'll be taking a look at that as well as some of the tools that I use as a meteorologist to go and look at past weather events. And I'll be walking you through a little bit of science too. And then at the end of the show, we'll be talking about our local weather for the next couple of days and getting a bigger look at the national picture. What comes next after sweeping snow, cold, and ice storms across the United States. So we'll take a first look at our tools here that I use as a meteorologist. A lot of them are openly provided by the National Weather Service, so you can easily just go online yourself and use these if you'd like. So the first one here is going to be from the NCEI, National Center for Environmental Information. It's a big way of saying they help you know and archive the data that we need here as a meteorologist to see, okay, what this past event actually looked like. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to start kind of towards the outset of the event. We can change our day on the calendar. So we're around January 23rd, 24th is when it was really reaching the continental United States, the start of Winter Storm Fern, as a whole lot of moisture was brought up from the Pacific coast. So we hit update map right here. And then you'll kind of see the first couple storms moving across the southern portion of the United States and a lot of central Texas, where they did see a lot of widespread flooding concerns. That's not where we're going to be focusing most of our information today. We're going to be looking a little bit further east, where they saw negative temperatures and a lot more snow. But do know this is the start of the system. I'm going to look here behind me at another website. This is the archive from the Storm Prediction Center. We're going to see a lot of fancy words on here that we won't go into depth on all of them, certainly. However, I am going to walk you through a bit of what I'm looking for when I see the starting of a really big storm. And again, these tools are all free online, so if you do happen to get really into it, you can certainly use them for yourself. So let's take a look. We just talked about the 23rd of January. So here we go, January 23rd. And then we can change the time. Keep in mind, this is in UTC time. So this is Greenwich Mean Time, if you ever heard of that. We're about, depending on the time of the year, standard time or daylight savings, around 6 to 7 hours off of that here in Grand Junction. Over towards the east, you move an hour for every time zone, so about 5 hours off for the eastern portion of the United States. So let's look here. Looked about 20Z here. So East Coast, depending on the time of year, comes out to around 3 p.m. Take a look at our different parameters. You won't need to know all these. Don't worry. We're only going to look at some ones that kind of help illustrate where this system is actually coming from. Let's look here. This is a 700 millibar chart. You don't need to know what a millibar is. It's just a measurement of pressure. We don't have to measure that in its entirety. What's important for you to know is how far up that actually is in the air. We use millibars because pressure varies a lot. It's not exactly a flat layer of the atmosphere that kind of ebb and flow vertically, but generally speaking, that's around 10,000 feet is 700 millibars. So about 10,000 feet up in the air. Let's take a look at our archive data. What does that look like on the U.S.? You see this right here, a low pressure system. I know usually it's a big L on the map, right? I suppose in the camera it's reversed, so this will look better for you. Big L on the map, right? It's a system of low pressure. It brings up all that moisture. It's what we associate with big storm systems. You can't really see that here, but what you can see is the direction of the wind flow. When you're looking at that low pressure system, it's going to be moving counterclockwise. And look at this. The winds come over towards the west, and they're pulled back up over towards the east, if you follow my mouse. So there, counterclockwise, that's your low pressure system. And it's pulling up all this Pacific moisture going east across Texas, and that's why you're seeing the onset of those storms. Alongside, a frontal movement there, of course. Two different air masses, cold and warm, mashing together. And so that's just kind of a basic rundown of what you're seeing. And I'll introduce another tool here in a moment. We have one more. But I want to take a look at the first destination we're going to be talking about here, which is Mississippi. You see, in more particularly rural areas, you're going to see those increased amount of power outages and the inability to deal with really cold, frigid temperatures. And it was particularly negative up towards the Midwest. But Mississippi was kind of the onset of places that you saw where you didn't see the infrastructure available to kind of deal with these storms. So we'll see how much snow and rain they got. Let's move to the next day. We're going to December 24th. Here we go. Update our map. And see, here's just our radar from that day. You can see this big line right here, and you can even see right here, notice this curve on the screen. That's our frontal boundary. That's the very edge of that system as it pushes further over towards the east. But here, looking over towards Georgia, Florida, didn't really go down there, right? It's because you already have a much more defined air mass, a lot warmer, moisture air getting pushed against all this coming up from the Pacific. So that's why you didn't quite see as crazy totals. However, you did definitely see some rain and snow down there. So that's what it looks like on our radar right here. What does it look like with our actual system? Why are you seeing all that moisture? It's because it hit the Pacific. Let's take a look at this. This is going to be the 24th right here. And we're going to look at a different chart. This chart we are going to look at is right here. I'm going to scroll a little bit further down. All right. Here's our freezing level info and our critical thickness. All right. There's a lot to talk about here. Wet bulb temperatures, though, these winter parameters, this is the one I wanted to look at. You hear about wet bulb temperature all the time in the summer. It's all about what the temperature will become after you squeeze all of that moisture out of the air. It's really important for winter, too, because it's going to help tell us where that freeze line is. Look at this. You see the line of blue right here? That's about where our freeze line is, the transition to freezing rain and a little bit of hail in there. Further south, looking at warmer conditions, but further north, that's where you see that possibility for snow. And when you get snow in areas that don't really receive it, here in Grand Junction, when you get a big snow day, it kind of shuts down some of the valleys, and certainly in the mountains, it gets a little hard to move past level. We're certainly not the only place that doesn't see a lot of snowfall this time of year. And when you get in places like Mississippi, again, hurts that infrastructure, takes down your power lines. So we're going to look a little bit further up here. We are looking for our chart, which is the, I have my notes right here. It's our 850 moisture convergence. Here we go. I'm going to pull that up for you right here. All right. Here we go. Scroll too far. This is a good visual of why you saw all this rain and precipitation down south. Pretty simple, this one. All the arrows coming up from the south, big zone of green and red right here. That's just showing where the majority of that moisture brought up from the Gulf is getting squeezed out of the air. And you can see with the arrows that aligns with that, it's all just coming up from the south, and it's aligning with that system we see here coming over from the west, that movement of air masses. So, right, coming up from the south right here, then the air coming over from the east. That's the formula you need for extra additional snow and rain. And what that actually looked like in terms of snowfall totals, we'll take a look at this tool right here. This is from the NCEI as well. We'll go over to Mississippi. We'll take a look at our snowfall for the date of the 24th. It's not going to be the craziest totals. We're only seeing a few inches, but do keep in mind, in a place that doesn't usually get this kind of snowfall, it's a whole lot. Look at this, only trace amounts on the 24th, but if you change your days, the 25th moves a little bit further along. Not too much of a drastic change there. I believe I skipped the day I was looking at. There we go, 23rd. See, completely dry the day before, and you're only getting those trace amounts towards the northern portion of the state. Moving along, only those trace amounts again. But that still had a ginormous impact when it actually came to infrastructure. And so I want to take a look at a package from another part of the nation that's going to give you a little bit more context of what just even this brief wave of winter weather, with you see, again, some places only getting trace amounts can still have a devastating impact. So we're going to head to our reporter, Raven Copeland, and we're taking a bigger look at the weather we saw previously.
With hundreds without power in Benton County, they've had to fill tanks with gas for their generators. And as those outages continue, their concerns about survival are growing by the hour. The outage map shows power is out for each of the 854 customers that the TIPA Electric Power Association serves. And unfortunately, it's been that way since last weekend. Officials say it could be a month before power is fully restored for Benton County.
Pretty rough. Cold, can't get on the roads, trying to get gas to keep a generator going, generator problems, neighbors trying to help each other.
Oh, it's been rough. We've been snowed in and couldn't get out, and for like about three days, I think, and it's been really hard.
Benton County residents tell your news leader they've had no choice but to make it. But as the days go by without any relief, many say they're feeling neglected and overlooked.
Here in Lamar, Benton County is kind of off the map, so the little communities, I don't see help coming.
WREG called the utility company Thursday morning for an update on the outages, but we were told to call back because the manager was out helping restore power. There was a dial tone when we called twice Thursday afternoon. However, a Facebook post from TEPA on Wednesday says additional utility crews from other states will come in this week to assist.
We just need the roads clean and where we can get in and out and make sure we get the power back on.
Propane gas, roads cleared, making sure people can get food.
Pleas from a small community doing whatever they can to survive. Reporting from Benton County, Mississippi, for your news leader, Raven Copeland, WREG News Channel 3.
All right, so that was a good look at what was happening down towards Mississippi. But of course, this is a widespread system, so it's moving a lot further north than that. And our next look is going to be up here in Tennessee. I wanted to show you another chart just to kind of give you a better illustration. And we're going to take a look at our snowfall totals here, going up towards, I know my alphabet, I promise you, I know the alphabet. Tennessee right here. We're going to plot our post right here to see kind of snowfall totals they were getting. Now keep in mind, Tennessee geographically is looking a lot more similar to us, getting a lot closer towards mountain ranges. What that means is, again, a big shutdown and an inability to get help in rural communities that might need it. So when you actually look at that snowfall total on the 24th, see here, still kind of hanging out towards those trace amounts for the most part. Here we go. See, again, minimal totals until you head a little bit further west. That's when you're getting those multiple inches of snow. So when you look at places closer towards the Memphis area, that's when you get the inability to get on the roads to go assist others. And by the time you get to here on the 25th, start to see their totals go up even more. It gets a lot colder because on the back end of that system, that's when the cold air actually starts to catch up with you. And then you're going to start to see those widespread negative overnight conditions that you saw in much of the Midwest, especially the Ohio Valley in particular. It's incredibly chilly. And then you get those snowfall totals going up on top of that. Getting, look at that, about 5.5 inches over towards Jackson. A little bit further north, again, hanging around that 4 or 5 inches range. You see 4.5 there. If you look down towards the bottom portion of our string, that's where I'm looking at those totals. Sorry, I didn't point that out earlier. Again, an incredibly snowy event. You're not going to see the end of it. It's going to push a little further east. But before we do that, I want to show you another package from our friends in Tennessee. Andy Corden is going to talk to you a lot more about what it means to, and the ability to actually get people help that they need.
So when you get out to a scene and people are trapped in their home, because you've been out there,
yes,
like with your guys, right?
Yes.
What is that like?
I mean, it's very emotional because you got people that's trapped. They've been without power for 5-6 days right now, and they're running out of gas for their generators. They're running out of propane. They still have heat, so they're running out of wood.
This is dramatic rescue video from this past Monday.
And if I go too fast, guys, just tell me to slow down.
As Hickman County deputies go above and beyond, they're carrying a woman to safety.
Yep. Stand by, I'm gonna go over here.
The sheriff tells me she was trapped in her own home. She had no heat, she had no electricity, and he says she was unable to walk.
We're almost there, ma'am.
This ice storm hammered Hickman County. Trees were down, lines were down, roads were impassable. At one point, Sheriff Jason Kraft tells me 90% of the county was without power.
You know, this is a small community.
Yes.
and you're out on the front line. You're the sheriff, but you're out there with a chainsaw. You're out there on the front end loader. I mean, you're like one of the guys. Why?
Because we're a small community, it takes all of us working together. All of us working together is what gets us through these difficult times like we're in right now.
The Hickman County Sheriff's Department is small, with only 36 deputies. When tragedies strike, every available officer jumps into action, and that includes the county's top cop, who was seen driving a front-end loader on one day, even working a chainsaw on another occasion.
Is there a sense of satisfaction when you're out there just, boots on the ground, you're physically feeling as the tree is coming off the house or the power line?
It is, because we know we're making progress. We're getting to the people that's not been able to get out of their homes. Well, like I said, we're a small community. It takes all of us working together. Everybody's got to pitch in, and if I can do a little bit to help lighten the load for somebody else, that's what we're going to do.
So at the height of the storm, the sheriff tells me they had about a 90% power outage. Right now, it's about 15%. They hope to improve that by next week. In Hickman County, Andy Cordan, News 2.
I'm back once again. Before the break, we took a look at what it means to actually be able to get help to people in the central portion of the United States, down towards the Ohio and Tennessee Valley, as winter storms swept across the nation. But that wasn't the end, of course. It hit the East Coast right after that, and that's where we'll be taking our next look here on Weather Eye. Taking a look at our graphic, just look at this, pulled all the way up from the south. You see this huge front. I know you usually look at the red or the blue line on a map, but it's still relatively straightforward to see. You see the boundary of where that drier and moisture area is, and it just pushed all the way across the east, bringing a lot of more widespread snowfall. So what we're going to look at next is New York, kind of the opposite of the situation, right? Instead of dealing with getting help to people so far away from major population centers, how do you deal it when everyone is in the same place? So let's take a look at those snowfall totals while we're here on our map. All right, we'll look at the 25th right here. And as it loads a little bit, we'll see a big day of snow varying a little bit. You'll notice here some of those dots don't actually have snow in them, but some of them do. That's because some of those sensors don't always remain up to date. It's perfectly pretty normal because it's a very complex system. But when you get a place that, say, has 11 feet of snow in central New York, or, hey, let's take a look down further south, still getting around 2 inches towards the southern tip of the state. And you're getting even over here towards Staten Island, still getting into that 3 to 4 inches range at the very most. And we move on to the 26th right here. And then it just goes up even more and even more because you get on the back end of that system. That's kind of where the heavier amount of snowfall ended up being. So we can update our map, see that here. As it pushes out into those overnight hours, it clears out of the area, but then you get a different phenomenon where it gets all the way up towards the north, and then you're pushing into some potential for snow squall territory as that air runs into a warmer air mass, becomes stationary, and then just dumps snow up on the Pacific the Atlantic Northeast. So that's why you're kind of seeing these more lines right here, right? This vertical line. Sometimes that's an illusion given by radar, of course, but here in New York's case, it definitely just making for an incredible week of snowfall. 2 inches here, 10. Look at that, 10 inches, over a foot here towards Rensselaerville. I have not been there. I apologize for the pronunciation of that. I definitely butchered it. And you look at your 2-day snowfall. Let's just put it in context. It only gets bigger, of course. You get down and further towards the south, over a foot of snow near a major populated area. So what does that actually mean in terms of being able to manage a city like that? And how does New York come together to deal with these big snowfalls totals? Take a look at a package right now coming from Greg Monker in New York. He's going to show us a little bit more about how the city managed to deal with all this incredible snowfall and freezing temperatures.
It's still a lot of snow. Some places still snowed in. Surrounded by a frozen wall, this car requires some heavy-duty action. Shovel by shovel, New York City agencies are deploying crews. The Departments of Sanitation, Parks, Transportation, and Environmental Protection on it. They're still at it 5 days after the snow stopped.
Yesterday was not too much, but today is much better.
It's probably melting some too, but they looks like they got out here too.
Right,
Cleared out.
right, yeah.
Miriam waits for the BX40 along East Tremont in the Bronx. She's been stepping carefully all week.
They should take more responsibility when something like this happens the next day, overnight, clear for other people, because it's not everybody can make it through the snow.
City officials say more than 23 million pounds of snow have been cleared. Crews cleared 12,850 crosswalks, more than 10,000 bus stops. 98% of bus stops with shelters now passable from the sidewalk to the street. Keep working, says the mayor.
We have additional contractors, additional emergency snow shovelers, and the work, it continues until every single New Yorker, no matter their mode of transport, is able to get around the city that is theirs.
First time in the city I saw that they actually have bulldozers that they actually removing the snow. I saw it in Fordham Plaza.
All right, so that was a look at New York. Now we're going to bring it back to current weather happening here in western Colorado, and we'll take a look at the national forecast too, because the East Coast is not done with snowfall, believe it or not. So what are we seeing here in Grand Junction as we move into the next week? Do keep in mind, this was recorded on February the 3rd, so there could be some shifts by the time it gets to you and you're watching it, but just wanted to let you know that before we start. Our future cast is going to look like as we get into the evening on Wednesday and the afternoon, still hanging out in those 50s. It's going to be an incredibly warm week here in the Western Slope. You're not going to see a lot of variation on our future cast. A lot of sunshine, not too many clouds. Even those overnight temperatures you see, I'm getting towards freezing, which is not what we should be expecting at this time of year. And getting back into those mid 50s. We're not quite pushing records most of the day in western Colorado. You'll notice those overnight temps might get a little closer, but it's only if we're getting into those 60s, that's when we're going to talk about those records. And you get to Saturday, a brief cool down here and there, maybe a spare cloud in the sky, but we're remaining incredibly dry. Even those places that are getting a little bit higher dew points, a little bit more moisture in the air, there's not any systems moving through our area to actually make the most of it. So you're still just going to see those 50s and clear skies hanging around. So let's take a look at our future cast right here. Show you a little secret here. You can still move the mouse around and look around the nation. And overall, on the front range, there's not going to be too many shifts, just some scattered showers. The front range is on the very edge of a zone of high pressure. The Rockies actually kind of act as a secondary air mass. It cuts off western air from eastern air. I'm sure you know that from having lived in Colorado long enough, but point is, they're getting a little bit more of that moisture on the eastern side of the divide, but it's only going to amount to some scattered snowfall. It's really not what we would want to see with this incredible deficit that we've seen in Colorado. We're at record low snowpack right now, only hanging around the 50 to 55% range for the most part, and we haven't been able to make up for that being only that 50-55% of capacity. Noonday on Wednesday, again, our entire regional forecast, it's looking very dry. Our next chances for moisture are going to be as we get into next week, or at least significant, any precipitation, rather. Why is that? This REX block right here, we've talked a lot about our REX blocks on the actual live broadcast. If you haven't heard me discuss them, what it is just that zone of high pressure stacked on top of that zone of low pressure. It's kind of fun to learn how to point. There we go. Low pressure on the bottom. And what that does is it pulls over that moisture from the Pacific, but then yanks it right back with the low pressure system before it can really get to us here in western Colorado. And we're not seeing any movement, any fronts moving through the area, any short waves, any little ripples, any disturbances, nothing at all. And so that's why we're remaining dry. There's just no real operators in the atmosphere right now to help us out. But you noticed on the eastern portion of the United States, there's a cold front moving through the area. What is that going to make for you if you're traveling east over the weekend? Another round of snowfall just after historic snow, say in places like North Carolina, that usually don't see snow at all this time of year or barely any. They're going to get a whole other round of that cool Arctic air blasting down from the northern portion of the United States. And you see that REX block kind of starting to fall apart a little bit as you get into the weekend, and then early in the middle of next week is when we're expecting potentially as a return precipitation on our future cast right here. So move on to our next graphic. This is our future snowfall totals. What's snow actually going to look like? Keep in mind, the GFS is the model we're using for this because it's very long range. it is also very, very, very aggressive when you're actually seeing those snowfall totals. So this right here, has those trace amounts into the inch range. I don't really think we're going to get that for the most part in the Central Mountains. It could be possible to sneak into the Elk Range, but for the most part, I expect us here to remain dry for the most part in terms of snow as we get in towards the middle of the week. There's just, again, not a lot of operators in the atmosphere, not a lot of fronts, not a lot of short waves that could actually get us a lot of measurable snowfall. But if you look on further towards the east, you're going to notice the results of that cold front sweeping across the United States. And what that's going to mean, particularly high snowfall totals, again, kind of towards that Ohio Valley and into the West Virginia area. Look at this right here, getting to that 4 to 8 inches range. Maybe even hitting a foot of snow at those absolute highest elevations towards the central portion of the Great Smoky Mountains. Going to be another round of snowfall. But what you really need to keep in mind is that these areas here are not expecting these colossal snowfall totals. So when you even get trace amounts to an inch in places like North Carolina, you're not really seeing the infrastructure prepared for that. We talked about that the entirety of the show, that the snowfall, second round of it right after such a large system is not necessarily what city managers or the people living there want to see. So that is all we have here for this episode of Weather Eye. Thank you for watching. We're going to transition to a weekly format, so I'll have plenty more weather information and science as we move into the coming months. And we'll talk a little bit more about details and things. I just thought it'd be fun to review such an impactful system that moved across the United States. So thank you for watching, and we'll be back with you next week.